Well, thanks very much. The world's changed in healthcare. I've been in healthcare for, I think, about 10 years right now. So I'm going to spend the next 20 minutes just kind of going over my specialty, which is B2C kind of modeling and how to enter into those markets. Now, the good news is I'm going to try to make this fast and interesting for you. I know at least I'm not between you and your bar, so it's between me and the entree, but I'm still going to try to make this go fast. One of the things about healthcare engagement, everyone's tried to do it. And there's a lot of funky things going on, and everyone's noticed this, particularly around consumerism. I started the book off with a quote. I decided I'm going to take a year off and get all my thoughts together, all the decks I've done, the papers, and how do you really engage with consumers? Because we tried to do that at United, and it's extremely difficult. And so what came out of this is kind of like a textbook. And I caught off the quote with, humans are extraordinary beings that rise to face adversity, but need adversity to be able to rise. And that's kind of a central theme, and that's very true about human behavior, which drives a lot of this stuff. Not only is it about our consumers, because consumers only think about health, it's a priority when something goes badly wrong. Okay, everything else, everything's fine. But that's true with companies as well. Like yourselves and any other company, we don't usually shift and change until something really bad happens. Okay, so engagements with this. I'm going to talk about where do I start. Let me see if I can get the clicker here. There we go. So what's engagement? I'm going to look at it from healthcare from maybe three perspectives. Really quickly, acquisition, retention, and health population. You know, working on chronic disease and health management and getting those programs out, because that's very big. Engagement itself is kind of a funny thing. So engagement can mean different things to different people. But a very early story, I was working at AT&T, and a really neat lady named Karen was in, and we were actually going out to one of our biggest telecom events. It was CTIA. I know it was probably out in Las Vegas, and everyone was going to be out there, all the carriers. And I owned product marketing at the time, and I asked my group is how do we engage? How do we bring people in? Because we've got a great message, but how do we get them to listen to us and do what we want to do? And we went around the world, and then Karen raised her hand and said, basically, what do we put cuffs on them? Handcuffs, and we'll handcuff one person to us, and we'll handcuff the client, and we'll actually walk them through the whole exhibit. And I was stunned, and the group was stunned, and they looked at her, and I said, wow, that's kind of forceful engagement. And I said, well, that's going to hurt their arms. And she goes, well, no, not if we use those fuzzy handcuffs that you can get. And I thought, oh my God, Karen. So that was my first experience in forceful engagement. Also, there are actually bad ideas. But Karen had something very unique that I see in the healthcare industry. She had great intent. And I sat in a round table today, and I heard some of that great intent. We may not execute the best way, but there's incredible intent for change. This is a real eyesore of a slide, but the idea is it's just eye candy. There's a lot of stuff up there. I'm not going to get into it, but big changes happen. They didn't happen overnight. Some of them happened fairly quickly, but look what happened in the industry. Payers, a lot of things went out. You've got ACA, which everyone talks about, but am I relevant anymore? What's my brand look like? CDHPs that came out years ago, cultural issues going on, security, technology, compliance. But then look at all the other things in health. You've got quality access, at-home care. You've got medical tourism, new entrants going in, social caring, B2C stuff. You know, Amazon and other companies like it changed the world. They changed how we think, how we make decisions. A lot of things are going out there. There are great expectations now for wonderful experiences. And if you as a company don't give one, I'm not going to buy from you. And people have changed because of some of these things. So the behaviors are different than they were before. And you've got what I call enablers. And in there, they're kind of like technology pieces. So you've got social, mobile, SMAC basically, social, mobile, analytics and cloud, technology, IoTs out there. A lot of things that are hitting this industry make it extremely difficult to maneuver. And a lot of people ask me, well, where do we start? How do we deal with all this? And besides technology, disruption, which is very prevalent, everyone talks about it, you don't hear so much about cultural disruption, which is a big key factor in here, particularly when we talk about behaviors. So one of the examples I'm going to give you, when I first went in United, I think less than a year I got in, I was brought in to say, we've got this website, and you see on the left, you probably can't see it, but there's a lot of text that's hard to find, hard to use. I said, what can we do to engage our people and make something useful? We're going to start to talk to, communicate with people. So basically I had about, I think it was a month and a half to come up with an idea, and they used to call this the big head site. I said, well, I want a friendly face in the medical industry to kind of welcome them, but something different we decided to do. We want to put the person's name on, say, hi Chris, what would you like to do today? Give you basic coverage information, and also in the nav pad is view my claims, look my benefits, find a doctor, or refill a prescription, because we found over 80% of the people that went to that site came to look for just those things, as opposed to hiding them in through an elaborate navigation. This is very unique from what happened before. The person running the site before had a very different view, very unconsumer-centric view, as I want to teach the people, I don't like white space, I certainly don't like graphics, you know, and this is the way, you know, our site went out. So this was actually received fairly well. The problem is can you sustain this the consumer view? People tend to fall back on what they're comfortable with. And so what happened, the next stage that I wanted to put was customization. Let people kind of build it the way they wanted to. And what came out was this. And this is from two people in the customer experience project that was there. They basically, I promoted my customization. They said, no, Bob, you got it wrong. Is we want to go after fat people because obesity is one of the chronic diseases. And we want to go on there and say, hi, Bob, you're fat, lose weight now. And to add insult is, today, you can't read it down there because it's all scripted anyway. Today's lesson is we're going to teach you something. Okay, and I was looking at them and I replied, you realize what damage you're going to do to the brand, and if you could even survive a great company like United Health Group. Well, here's the funny thing. The best of intent, these people, one was a nurse by the way, best of intent wanting to go on, but their way of doing it was scolding. We're going to tell you what to do. Didn't realizing it's a consumer world, and the consumer will just blow them off. For some reason, they thought a person, Bob, could go to the site, see this, and then sign up the next morning and see it again, and go the next morning and see it again, and I'll eventually get the lesson that I'm going to change. It's not the way we engage. It just doesn't work. But again, best of intent. Another thing that goes on that make you aware of is most companies, especially in the healthcare area, have these silos in what goes on. This is actually a representation of something that happened to me where all of a sudden you've got a lot of people who want to touch the customer or the consumer, and they all in different areas or in different parts of the business. So some people might put out a mobile app, some people might put out two. Some people might have a web to go into, and believe it or not, you can have 3 or 4 of these instances, and then you've got someone trying to throw print at you, then you've got a contact center or call center trying to talk to you, and you've also got email out there. From a consumer's point of view, I'm getting pelted. If I've got 7 people trying to talk to me at one time and it's not consistent or coordinated, I've just turned you right off. I've actually disengaged you. But the best of intent. The idea here is more channels is better. Multi-channel is the buzzword. I'm sure you've heard of that. And then omni-channel came out. I don't like either of those. I like channel unity. One channel. I don't care what technology goes on. One channel, one port out. Technology will take care of yourself, but you've got to have channel unity. It's got to be consistent and coordinated. In another area here is where do I start, like I said before. And I've outlined some basic steps of how you begin to get into this. And in the book, I get into this in obviously a lot more detail because it does read like an academic text. But I figured out there's a way to do this. 2 things have to happen. You have to kind of fix yourself inside before you can even talk to a consumer. So to do a B2C thing is first to start off, what's your goal? And I always go around and start off, what's your raison d'etre? What's your reason for being? What's your purpose? Because if I can figure out what I really want to be when I grow up, it actually helps define my culture, defines who I am. A lot of times when that's not well defined, and a lot of people put out mission statements and vision statements, and I love those and I do those very well, a lot of people don't follow them because maybe they're not embraceable and they're not actually done that well. But if you have a raison d'etre, you define who you want to be, that can really work for you. It helps to set the stage for how you want to do a culture shift. And then your existing state, your B2C state. Where are you in getting close to a consumer? And I'll actually show you 4 states of how to get there and where you could be in that range. And then B2C alignment. So once you're into accepted, say I'm gonna jump into this area and really move to more of a B2C world and talk to those consumers, is how am I aligned culturally, technology, and so on. And then understanding those consumers. Who are they? You know, what is their profile? What is their psychographic, technographic, sociographic kind of data planes to be able to communicate to them in a relevant manner? And then how do they behave? Because right now, and I read quite a bit of stuff on this, is how we make our purchase decisions is kind of how we make our decisions, which is kind of how we make our health decisions. So really understanding consumers' thought process and how they behave and what those triggers are. And the last one, I've got 4 steps to engagement. So a lot to do very quickly, so I'm going to kind of float through this fast. Where do I start? Raison d'etre. Oh, wait a minute, I hit the wrong one. There we go. Identity is, a lot of people do this. I mean, if people are doing cultural transformation, which I was actually part of at United Health, they try to come up with corporate values and what's going on. I think this is incredibly important because not only to your employees inside, but the outside is, you know, what is your identity? And from the things you list, you actually can get an idea is, am I really consumer driven? And what you'll find is like, whoa, I want to be this, and are you really doing this? And you do a comparative. Sometimes it could be accountable. Am I going to accept responsibility or respect? Do I value the person, and do I value that person's values as well? Or do I want to be kind of a caring company? That is kind of the core of what you are from a cultural point of view. Another one is your raison d'etre I asked before. In here I use those 2 values, identity and raison d'etre, to form a culture strength index, which allows you to kind of calculate where you are. And this is stuff you can do on yourself. It doesn't require you to hire anybody. And see how close I am to that consumer and where do I want to go, and you kind of fill the gap. On raison d'etre is my reason for being company financials. Is it all about revenue? Is it about customer growth? Certainly that's one of them, that's why you're in business, but it's also about care quality, for instance. Do I want to get the best care for my member? Or could it be, do I engage members in better health by building trust and relationships? Or could it be health threats, working with data and research to minimize future health threats? If you have too many of those, you're probably spread too thin. But if you can focus on a handful of those and let that permeate through the company, and then you really drive your business for that, that will really move into where you're trying to go. It'll help you, what I call, rejuvenate the culture. I was part of a cultural transformation at United. It's a lot of work, hard to do. Behavioral transformations usually take anywhere from 4 to 5 days from a psychologist's point, or 4 to 5 days, 4 to 5 years from a psychologist's point of view. That would be awful quick. But I found if you really rejuvenate what you've already got, find out what works within your, because there's some good stuff there. Maybe it got hidden by some of the other stuff, and kind of build on that, and then build your identity and raison d'etre off of that. You can actually achieve maybe in months instead of what might take a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of effort over the years. B2C state. What state are you in? Okay, it's a colorful chart. I'm just going to talk about some of the stuff. But the idea is, I figure you're in 4 states of accepting whether you're in a B2C model. One is denial, and then you move to acceptance, willingness to change, and adoption. Okay, denial is basically, we just know better, it's not happening, I got my eyes closed. You know, as my kids would go, they'd cover their hands like this and go, no, 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 no. And that's happened in many different industries. A lot of companies do this. I don't think a lot of health carriers are in this, but your risks are huge. Losing customers, certainly missing potential threats because you don't want to see them, and seeing a train wreck. In acceptance mode, you kind of move up. It's a great idea, we want to do it, limited adoption. I call it the comfort zone because you kind of get into this comfortable feeling, you've done a check mark, but you don't have a lot of action happening. You don't get a lot of inertia, and there's kind of this fear to move ahead. The next stage, where a lot of companies kind of stall in, what I call willingness to change. In basically this mode, I call it the chaos zone. I say that for a reason, is you want to do it, there's limited effort into it, you've got leaders mostly involved, but you've got a lot of siloed feelings what's going out. It hasn't really been embraced within the company, and I see a lot of companies in this area right now. The way you notice it is people are trying, but you see a lot of excuses happening. So you know it's there, you've gone past acceptance, I want to change, but I'm not quite there yet. You don't have unity in the business, and you really need that when you're talking to consumers because they can actually tell when that doesn't happen. The last stage I've got is the adoption zone. This is where you've embraced it. You know, B2C world's here. Man, I get it. I want to move toward it. I know it's going to be hard to do, a little painful, and I call it the accountable zone, where you've taken full accountability for moving in. You're committed. Leadership and down is fully involved. You don't see the passive-aggressive nature anymore, and you actually see it happening in the call centers, products. You see it certainly in the culture because it's redefining. The thing you have to worry about, the risk, is arrogance, where you fall right back into denial. This is where you constantly have to look for this and keep moving. There we go. So I talked about before is once you've accepted the move ahead, whether you're in the willingness to change or the adoption, is what's your B2C alignment? And I have it in terms of 4 areas: consumer, cultural, technology, and your industry areas. And I'm going to go over those really briefly, what each of those are. But to be successful, you kind of have to be in sync with those. On this one, consumer, health is so personal to people. I read, actually, I did a paper on building relationships and why that's so important, and I even pulled off of Clayton Christensen's work out of Harvard on the great work he's done around disruption and customer experience. And then about a month later, I read another article out of HBR was talking about, well, relationships really don't matter. And that may or may not be true in some other companies, but in healthcare, it really does, because health relationships are very intimate. Your personal health is very intimate. And that's where the payers have a huge advantage, because you're sitting with a customer in their most critical phase, and to build a relationship thereby, if you could keep it, you could keep it for life. The other thing is they demand a good experience because of what's gone on in the consumer world right now. The thing I state the most is simplicity is a priority. If you want a great book, it's by John Maeda, who used to be associate professor at MIT, and then he went over to RISD as a president for a while. He's got the Laws of Simplicity out. It's a very small book because it's simple, so he actually did it. But it gives you an idea what simple means. When I first came into healthcare, the execs told me, Bob, you don't understand. Healthcare is very complex. And I said, why? I said, I came from wireless. I mean, that was pretty darn complex. The funny part is, it is complex. There's a lot of moving parts. But what I have also found is the folks I work with tend to make it complex. And so do we really focus on that? I mean, and it's really our approach. Or do we focus on simplicity and kind of bringing it down and making it easy? Because the easier we make it for the consumer, the more they're going to understand, the more they're going to actually have a relationship with us and maybe even do something. So simplicity is such an important piece. If I don't see simplicity in a mobile app that I'm using, and I use a lot of mobile apps, that app is gone within seconds. They disengage me really quickly. So I've got it up there as number 2. It's a very important one. Decision-making mode, everyone tends to throw out a lot of information, analytic information, facts and figures to people. Look at this, look at this, look at this. And I'm actually a little guilty of this today because I need those to kind of back up what I'm saying. But the funny part is we make a lot of decisions based on our emotions. And in our mind, in the book I talk about a mind molecule I created, left brain, right brain, and how we analyze and how we do things, make decisions on the emotional side. And a lot of things we do, it's really on the emotional side. A lot of it comes from influence, okay? Particularly when you buy things. Where does influence come from? 52% of unsatisfied customers communicate to others about bad service they received. Okay, so you're getting a lot of influx from there. Self-service up there too. They talk about self-service. They actually want to do something, but sometimes they're prevented to. If they go to a website or some kind of self-service mechanism that you have out, you hit a wall and then all of a sudden I'm calling the call center. But people actually would rather work through self-service mechanisms than actually talk to a person. This is a big change around consumerism. But we talk about that influence piece. For those that have looked at the ZMOT model from Google, you look at the old model of how we make purchasing decisions really quickly. P&G suggested that, well, you have an ad out there as stimulus. You go to the shelf, you have 6 to 7 seconds to make a decision. You usually buy because you didn't read the product, but you like the packaging, or you saw the ad, and then you take it home, and the second moment of truth is use it, and then you tell your neighbors about it. So advertising really makes those decisions. In the ZMOT model, very different, and this is why social media is so relevant and the B2C model is so relevant. Here, stimulus advertising doesn't have a huge factor anymore. You're getting what's called in the 0 moment of truth, where people, when they use it, get on a social channel, and let me tell you about my bad experience. And that's basically, let's see where it's back. That's where you've got people here, 52% of unsatisfied customers talk about that bad experience with somebody else. You got a lot of people talking about things. This is impacting decision-making, not only whether to buy, but what to do around in health as well as other things. I think people use about 10.4 sources to make a decision. In healthcare, it's found out, in the study I read, it's about 11 sources to make a decision. The interesting part, a lot of those sources are actually from people they don't even know. So they're getting it from these very untrusted sources. So it's extremely important you understand social media, how people are making these decisions. It's not the same as it was. Facts and figures don't necessarily do it anymore. It's what this other person said and read about it, and do I buy into it? That is huge right now. The other thing too is brands are created and destroyed in the ZMOT right now. So you're seeing a lot of companies, consumer companies particularly, taking money out of advertising and putting it into social, because that's where it's happening right now. It's where you get your bang for the buck. The other thing I talked about was cultural disruption, one of the aligning pieces. So cultural disruption and enablement, you have to radiate who you are. So why did I spend time on raison d'etre and identity? It's really key there, really defining that, and how close are you to being a B2C person. You know, when you do your work, do you ever talk about a customer? I read a long time ago where a CEO would do I think he did like quarterly talks to his whole employee team. It was a rather large company. And in every one of those talks, a customer would come up and tell them something what was going on, forcing that customer view up there. So it's extremely important. Localization is also important. A lot of healthcare companies put up retail stores. I know United did, Emblem Health did. I visited up in Harlem. It's actually one of the best examples of a retail store I've ever seen. It was integrated into the community. I was extremely well received. The person I went up there as well. They had places for moms to put their kids, play areas. They had places, it was very well done as far as interaction. They understood the local effort and they understood how to deal with the people that were there. Another thing that's happening, I have RDs up there. A lot of supermarkets right now are hiring registered dietitians. This is a huge thing. They are in touch with not only that consumer, but how to eat healthier, how to do better. They're actually embedded in the local commerce area of the municipality, in schools, in the YMCA, in the libraries. So one way to go to localization is you certainly could put up a store, but if you as payers would partner with people who are already there, already doing it, have presence, they're actually looking for support, and they're actually starting to get it from a lot of food manufacturers right now, but wonderful opportunities there to culturally disrupt what's going on and build the brand, and social channels, as I talked about before, because the rules there are kind of wild and woolly. Technology disruption, really quickly, you've got technology enablers out there. A lot of times I've had a person come up to me and say, Bob, we got to do a mobile app. And my background, I did 11 years in wireless and mobile, and I said, well, why? He said, well, because we got to have it, everyone else has it. And I said, well, let's hold back. I said, chances are you need a mobile app, but that's not the reason why. What's the real reason why you want to do this? It could be is that you want to connect with the consumer or get their information or so on. That technology, that mobile, that's just an enabler, okay? So really focus on the things that really matter. Think customer scenario first, then bring enablers in to accomplish it. But very seldom do you bring in a technology, and I'm an electrical engineer, so that doesn't make any sense for me, but bring a technology in later to accomplish what you're doing in a business solution. Multi-channel, I talked about before really briefly. I think I mentioned channel unity. It's really a compound channel. I would look at multi-channel very differently than we do now, because that's one area it fails. In my own experience in calling my payer when I have to, I get a very different information when I talk to the contact center than when I look on the web and the mobile app that actually fails on me. So, you know, from a consumer point of view, channel unity is actually incredibly important. Industry. This is the last one I've got for B2C alignment, is what will that world look like? And that's what people are trying to find out. It's being shaped right now, and it's being shaped a lot by the consumers. What happens if you don't connect with that consumer in the way they want to be connected? If there's an alternative, they're going to jump, because that is the behavior, and that's what they've found to do in purchasing almost any product. Overlays are happening. Overlays are actually happening. They are starting to happen in the healthcare area. They're already happening. My neighbor, who's he's actually an officer at Chubb who does high-end property and casualty. He told me earlier this week that Google now is selling property and casualty insurance directly. And that's funny, because I told him about a half a year ago, I said, why don't you pull me in, let's work a strategy to start diversifying, because I said, you're in a commodity market. He says, no, that's not going to happen. And here Google is coming out with doing some things. You're going to see a lot of new entrants going into this market with great guns, and their aim will be do a great experience. They'll do a good product, but they'll be a fantastic experience, because that's how they know to win the consumer's hearts. One fact here I have is 40% of the companies that were at the top of the Fortune 500 in 2000 were no longer there in 2010. That's a startling fact. And a lot of those companies didn't adapt to the new business models, whatever they be. 4 steps to consumer decision making. And I think I've got to go maybe just a little bit faster because I want to leave time for questions and answers. But basically, and this is really simplifying it, but a consumer decision requires almost 4 to 5 points. First is awareness. Am I even aware of this problem? And I use an example of obesity. You know, an example is, gee, I may be overweight with a BMI of 33. I had no idea, is that important to me? Okay, a lot of people don't know, a lot of people don't care, it's just not the high priority, but if you could bring awareness to a consumer that's saying, wow, this is a fact, I didn't know that. And so now being barraged with a ton of facts, this one's sitting in your face. What does a consumer usually do? Well, they go on the web and they research it, or they ask somebody, or they go to social channels. And how does that affect me? Is this something important for me? And find out, hey, obesity could lead to a heart attack, it could lead to this, could lead to this, could be some really bad thing. So basically the consumer is starting to say, how does that affect them? The next thing they do is validate it. How does this affect me? And is there a solution I can do? Because maybe a payer or somebody else is promoting a weight loss program, which actually the local registered dietitians do provide at the local supermarket. Will this solution work for me? They need that validation fact. So it's kind of like, wow, I didn't know about that. Does it affect me? Yeah, I guess it does. Can it help me? So you're kind of working through the decision process. And the last one adopts it. And they either accept it or they discard it. They say, no, I don't want to deal with it. What's interesting about engagement, that's a one simple decision. Engagement is kind of, you're running through this constantly. Because engagement, you're constantly making that decision over and over and over. And if you want sustainable engagement, that's kind of the cycle you go through. The last one I've got here, which is kind of an interesting one, I abbreviated this. Again, I'm going through a lot of things shortly because the book gets in a lot more. But I take this backwards. If you want to do engagement, it's all about changing behaviors, because behaviors are really the key to this. In order to change a behavior, you need to influence that customer. And a lot of that will change the way they think. In order to influence, you've got to build trust. Okay, somewhere. This is why the relationship is so important. To have trust, you need a meaningful relationship worthy of that person's time, because people don't have that much time anymore. It's one reason I live on my smartphone. If I have 5 seconds of free time, I'm sitting down there checking something or doing something. So it's important you take advantage of that. In order to build a relationship, you need to interact where that consumer lives, not where you live, where the consumer lives. They have a lifestyle, and what's perfect about health, that impacts their lifestyle directly. This is why you're seeing a lot of new entrants starting to hit this area, that market. It's kind of a new place to live. It's not when you're sick, not when you're going to the gym. It's like my lifestyle is really the new health. I think that's very important. In order to interact successfully, you need a great experience. You need to have relevant relationships, relevant information, super experiences, and that's customer experience and user experience. User experience is so often overlooked at one point, but how well does this work for me? It's certainly got to be coordinated channels. You've got to have consistent messages, and it's got to be useful to me. If I can do this in this age, chances are I can get some behavioral change, and I can get people to start beginning the engagement process. And I end this up with 4 stages to engagement. So the way a lot of people are looking at this, and I did this particularly for payers, is first you need to understand who these consumers are before you send a note out or an email or blast a bunch of things, because I get a ton of stuff in the mail myself. I get newsletters from a local hospital. I get newsletters from regional practice. I get newsletters from providers I don't even know. I get stuff from my payer, a ton of stuff. It's just too much stuff. It almost ends up in the garbage all the time. They don't understand me. I look at it really quick and I find it's not relevant. You really need to understand what affects me. How am I going to make those decisions that are very important? Am I going to give this 2 seconds to look at, or is it going to get tossed? Second one is, once you understand who they are and you build a profile, you build out personas, and you actually build out these great experiences. You kind of craft out, design what they want to be and how you want those interactions to look like. Then you've got basically an integrated communications platform or solution of some type to allow me to focus all that experiences and what I want to do through these channels in a way that is consistent and integrated within the company. And then basically you can start beginning engagement programs with communications back and forth. So it's really 4 things that allow you to get into this. So to summarize really quickly, and I know I went through a lot of stuff, but I just wanted to touch on points, number 1, to stimulate discussion, but also points that might stimulate discussion over the next couple of days, because in some of the workshops we're going to be talking about some of these, and that's really the idea of this. But really it's, where do I start? internally for one thing, am I ready for this? Do I understand my reason for being? Am I fully committed to jump into this because it's happening? I didn't make it happen, it's here, so am I going to be here or am I going to do something else? And then B2C alignment, how aligned am I ready to do that? And if I am, externally, then start understanding who your customers are, how they think, how they make those decisions, understanding the personas, building those great experiences, communicate with channel unity, and then ultimately do some engagement programs, whether that's for acquisition, retention, or health management. So that's really it. I talked a lot over a very quick period of time. I apologize. I know that was a lot of slides. If you have any questions, I don't know if I still have, do I still have time?
Sure. Any questions?
Yes.
Thanks, Bob. That was really great. But one of the questions I have is that, like, how are, when we talk about understanding consumers, we're going to have a lot of data to be able to really understand them, like, browsing behavior and shopping behavior and credit scores and, financial status and blah, blah, blah. And when are people going to push back on that? Because some of that is a little scary. When you hear about people calling you up and saying, okay, Nancy, you bought a bag of barbecue potato chips on July 5th, and that's not good. That would really piss me off.
Yes, yeah, and it's really understanding that consumer. Like, are you using the data right? You're building a relationship. Would you do that to your neighbor? You shouldn't. So why would you do that to a consumer? I absolutely agree with you. Like any technology, it could be bad. Even mobile. Like back in 1999, I was doing wireless data apps, and I came up with the idea. This is when Blockbuster was still in business, who didn't make that Fortune 500. Wouldn't it be cool if it knew, and this is why I created the space-time portal patent, if it knew I was driving home, and it knew what time it was, so it knew I'm driving home, not driving in, it knew my proximity, and I'm pretty closely within 5 miles of Blockbuster app. I wanted to push an app or a notice out on a mobile phone that would say, hey Bob, I know you like this stuff because I got your profile, I know what you like because I've got your history, and if you go in now in the next half hour, I'm going to give you a 50% discount on picking any video you want. Knows I'm not going to go there anyway, but it can get a video that it has tons of because it knows its inventory off the shelf. To me, I call that a smart ad or a value-added ad, which made sense to me. But if it just started pushing me stuff, and I'm starting to see that on cell phone apps right now, that's very annoying. So it's really got to add value, and it's got to fit in my lifestyle. Something like that would fit in my lifestyle. I think before you start also doing the kind of thing you said is, do you do that right off the bat? No, you've got to build a relationship. You've got to build trust. This is a gradual build. It's not like go and slam into the market. Like this, I didn't make this to seem like an easy fix. And frankly, if 4 steps was all it took, wow, that would be really easy. It's a little more complicated, but the approach is there. But yeah, I think people would appreciate that. Coming from a payer is going to be tough. Because the last time I checked, the trust factor for payers was around the federal government, 6 to 7%. And that's, wow, how do you fight that? Well, there's ways to do that. You build your brand. Actually, one of the things when I was at United, I suggested, oh boy, I'm going to say 7 years ago maybe, something like that anyway, 5 years ago. Our brand is hard. Some people love us, some people don't love us. We're the people that don't pay claims, and then some people just love us. So I said, why don't we diversify? Number one, we should diversify. Plans are getting to be a commodity. And why don't we get into a company who's health-minded and actually shoot off their brand? And then we could launch some health programs. And I said, why don't we buy Weight Watchers? And the executives laughed at me. And that was actually a smart thing to do. And they were buyable at that time. And I thought that would have been incredible. But that's not where their minds were. But that's where the consumer mind was. So what if we bought Weight Watchers, put it through, sponsored by United Health, kept it small, kept Weight Watchers as the brand, and started communicating through that channel? Partnering is an incredible way to do this. So for payers, those opportunities are sitting out there. So I would approach it a little differently, but I would do it.
Any other questions? Going once? Going twice? Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.